come and he'd tell us to get away from there.
Yeah,
Those cucumbers aren't for you. Those are for gonna make pickles out of those, so you leave those alone.
Now we're talking about pickles when we're supposed to talk about movies.
Yeah, that was Gedney's Pickle Factory. It's still there.
I was born in Chicago, Illinois, 1896.
Bastrop, Texas, 1894.
1893, October 10. I'm an Eskimo from Buffalo, where they invented snow.
They were not called movies, they were called picture shows.
Usually on the sad parts, you could hear a pin drop almost.
Oh, we lived it.
Buster Keaton was a...
Buster Keaton.
Buster Keaton was...
and Fatty Arbuckle.
He was what you...
Fatty Arbuckle.
Buster Keaton was what you...
First pictures I remember that came out following the earthquake and fire in 1906 here.
That was horse and buggy days, you know. Took you an hour to drive 5 miles.
Because it was quite a new thing in Billings.
Oh, I see.
And it was quite an event in my life.
On this was right on the main street, but it looked like a cow shed. There was no windows or nothing. It had big double doors in the
We
front.
went 2 blocks from where we lived, in a store, 5 cents admission.
I would hoard my pennies until I accumulated a nickel.
Much less know it. We thought it was wonderful to have the film up there to begin with. That was one of the marvels of our age.
How could they do that? How could they show people moving around?
Well, it's been so long ago, it's just all like a dream.
You mean you went with a boyfriend at that
Well,
age?
sure, why not?
Remember the path where we met long, long ago, long, long ago. Oh, yes, you told me you never would forget. Long, long ago, long ago. Well, I was so excited I thought I'd burst. You know, an 8-year-old kid and seeing something that was unheard of before that, you know. You can't imagine it unless you're there. I can see that picture just as plain on that big canvas. I can almost pick out the young man, and he looked sad. He looked so sad that I cried about it.
We had a theater in Kansas City that was in a cheap neighborhood. And my brother and his fiancée, they were not married yet. On my brother's day off, he would take his future bride to this cheap theater. And they featured Charlie Chaplin pictures. And one time, my brother came up missing, and old Bessie started to turn around to look for my brother, and he was down in the aisle, roaring with laughter at a Chaplin film. She was thoroughly embarrassed. The ushers came and picked him up. And I think that's funny.
Don't forget we had live actors along with the motion picture.
When they were changing these reels, The interval was covered by a lady musician.
The owner heard about me, and he couldn't get anybody else, I guess, so he asked me to sing. Wait till the sun shines, Nellie, and the clouds go drifting by. We will be happy, Nellie, by and by. Wait till the sun shines, Nellie, by and by.
This moon, June, all those songs have the same words, da 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 da. That's all they could give it.
I'm lost in some of those.
I remember we used to go to these little towns in Canada.
Yeah.
They were really primitive. And there was one place in particular I remember. The movie house, they had no electricity. And they had oil lamps to light the place.
Yes.
Without electricity, I can't understand how they showed the movies.
How could they?
There must have been, they had some sort of a problem there.
Well, they turned the crank.
Yes, I know, but they had to have light.
They had to
I
have
know they
the-
turned the
had
crank.
something to work it out.
Look, I know that much. I know you have to turn the crank.
That's amazing.
But they had lamps, oil lamps, and they had strings tied to the control, which pulled the wick up, you know.
Yeah.
So when the picture was over, they pulled the string and the wick went up to light the place.
I remember the man coming out and telling us, well, now we're ready for the show. Now, quiet, everybody, quiet. It was this great, big, barn-like building. And the screen was set up like it was on two poles. And each end of the screen was attached, you know, crosswise to the poles. And that was your screen. And I don't know where the moving Kodaks were and all of the equipment that they put the movie on, but I suppose it was up above us in some kind of a little loft. But it was not a theater by any means. And I remember so well thinking to myself, well, this is no party. I've been in nicer places than this, and I can't understand why they're charging for it. I remember we were all waiting to see something exciting coming along, and it wasn't too awfully exciting. It was good, but it wasn't too awfully exciting. But we sat there just spellbound anyway. I mean, we were seeing movies for the first time in our lives, and it was really fun.
In the good old summertime, strolling down a shady lane with your baby mine. You hold her hand and she holds yours, and that's a very good sign that you're my Tootsie Wootsie in the good old summertime. Thank you. Did you ever go to any movies, silent movies much? Huh?
I didn't care much for the movies.
Well, here, my first experiences with silent movies was Faribault County State Fair, County Fair. They had a tent there. And us kids, they say, movie, we never heard of movies.
Yeah.
And we went in there, we had a show.
But I didn't.
The name of the movie was The Great Train Robbery.
Oh, yes.
And they have a man that talks about explaining them things. He explain what happened. And this robber, he wanted to shut off the engine. He went in the engine room there, and the engineer, he had a shovel, shoot somebody, wanted to hit him with that. And instead of that, the robber hit him with a chunk of coal and knocked his brains out. That is called the Great Train Robbery.
Won't you come home? Won't you come home, Bill Brady? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember that. We call them happy days then. The movies. Going to the movies night? Yes, yeah. I remember the last movie I remember going to. I was going with a girl, and she said she was going to Houston. And I begged not to go to Houston. I said, oh, don't go to Houston. When you going to Houston? And I just saying that, even talking to her, you know. And she didn't go. And I went out with another girl, and by me telling her not to go, she thought I meant it, you know. But I didn't mean it. And she walked in and saw me, this other girl with me. I had this other girl there, and she come in there and sit down in my lap with this other girl. Yeah, now, I always remember that one. That was at the movie. Yeah, it was a bad night.
I played for silent movies when I was 15, 16, and 17. And we played in the Opera House at Genoa Junction, Wisconsin. The piano was set at an angle so you could look at the screen and see what was playing, and then you played accordingly. The Perils of Pauline came on every Saturday afternoon, and the place was filled. And when they got through playing Perils of Pauline, she was usually tied to a railroad track and the train coming, or she was up on the train top of a car and there was a bridge coming, anything to be in a very bad predicament. And of course, the place was full of children for Saturday afternoon, and they applauded and stomped and screamed. And then the film would fade. Well, you'd end up with a real bang and hope that everybody will come back the next Saturday. Way back when
I ran the Wurlitzer organ at some of the big picture theaters here. They heard that same music 1,000 times. People would come regularly, they'd set the same old tune. When the old mother was dying, I had terribly pathetic music, sympathetic. There was a horse race, I had other things, and I kept changing the roles. And I had no end of not only what was on the organ, but I had loads of little pulleys and straps where I could ring bells and cowbells and chimes, and so I'd accommodate the music. They called them Nickelodeons. They were only 5 cents to get in. Later they went to 10 cents and people thought it disgraceful. I haven't thought of it in how long is that? Over 80 years, nearly 90 years.
I remember saving my dimes to get to go to the movie.
Oh, yes. Well,
and then later on, as I grew...
I was much younger then.
Oh,
because I'm a lot younger than you are. And so I was much younger.
It was about that time I began to go out with some of the boys, and occasionally a boy would ask me to go to a movie, which thrilled me to death, and I felt like I was quite some person that...
Oh, sure. I just know how you felt. I know that. There didn't seem to be a lot of sex business in any of the pictures. There might have been a few smooches, but they weren't.
They didn't bother
they
you.
were permissible.
As I remember the first movie that I went to there in Billings, we had the musician down in front, and she played that piano just like it was made of wood. She just played as loud as she possibly could.
Too loud.
And you know, we only had to pay 10 cents to get into the movies.
I will believe
Do you remember that?
Yes.
Charlie Chaplin and Daddy Hotbucker. All those people, you knew them, or at least I did. Oh, I tell you what, if I'd been a little older, I'm sure I'd gone out after Douglas Fairbanks. I thought he was the last word. Oh, I wish he could just see me. But he never did. You just imagine what it would be to be out there living in Hollywood with all those wonderful people that you saw in the movies.
We'd shoot exteriors for 2 days, cameraman and myself. I got $5 a day.
But you hear, see Tom Mix in his yellow Stutz driving down Hollywood Boulevard, waving his hat.
we think of the good old days, but we were starving.
I remember.
You remember
with
it.
Mac Sennett.
Yeah.
We used to get in 2 Cadillacs, leave the studio, go down to the beach, no script. But as you went along, they just talked the idea, and we could just shoot all day long down there, and come on back, and that was the story.
We used to shoot a lot of comedy shorts that way.
Oh, that.
And we'd go outside, and they'd have a gag or two in mind, and then they'd develop them as
That's
they
right.
worked along. And I remember you'd go out, and it began to rain. And they wouldn't call it off. They just rewrite it for rain.
That's right.
And you'd shoot it.
Sure.
And of course, you always had the big... Tell us a story about Clara Bow and...
I don't think we better talk about that.
He's assistant director on this company that's working on Sunset Boulevard. And they're shooting out in the middle of the boulevard. There's a railroad track went along there in those days.
Streetcar track it was.
Huh?
Streetcar.
Streetcar?
Yeah.
Yeah. And along comes this Rolls Royce, Phaeton, open Phaeton, the top down. And it's just coming along slowly, and one wheel is in the railroad track. And it just comes right up the company, and they finally jump on it and stop it, and here's Lou Cody and Clara Bow in there stark naked, both of them, passed out drunk. So Harry calls the studio. He said, what'll I do with them? He said, call the police. So he called the police. Police came and got them, drove them home and left the car. And it was covered up. But this sort of thing happened in Hollywood every once in a while. You remember your story now?
That's it.
That's it.
That's it. That's.
Wait till the sun shines, Nellie, when the clouds go drifting by. We will be happy, Nellie, don't you cry. Let me call you sweetheart, I'm in love with you. It's a long, long way to Tipperary, but my heart's right there.
I wrote several of the little two-reelers that were made in Hollywood when I was there. Well, this was during the World War, you know, and all these people in the movies were selling war bonds. And they built a stage in a little park. It was a small park, and they built it under a big pepper tree. And Fairbanks Sr., Charlie Chaplin were stars and the things, and they were selling war bonds. And it is under a big pepper tree, and one of the things that Fairbanks was noted for was the fact that he was an athletic movie star. And all of a sudden he disappeared. And so the other two said, boy lost, you know. And the crowd, I took it up, I had a hollering, boy lost. About that time, my Fairbanks jumped out of the pepper tree onto the stage. He got up the pepper tree, they hadn't even seen him do that, you know. Just little old things like that, but that were funny at the time, you know.
It's a long ways to Tipperary, it's a long ways to go. The first real money maker we had was a great train robbery, and we'd book it and rebook it. I expect we showed it 3 or 4 times. We had 2 theaters in Ryan, Oklahoma, where we lived at that time. My mother sold tickets and took them up, and I ran the machine. Well, I had at least 20 fires. Usually we had a window upstairs, up where the booth was. And once or twice I'd take the reel off completely and just throw it out and let it burn up outside. In Oklahoma at that time, they made so many westerns. Westerns went over real well. Always have a western at least once a week.
Okay, let's break for lunch.
The theater was full every Saturday night. Every Saturday night. You could stir them with a stick. They were so thick. Screen didn't explain very much. Not those days, they didn't. They didn't talk like they do today. So if you know what I mean. You just had to kind of guess what the picture's all about.
Attention residents and staff, at this time we would like to congratulate Maybelle Shook on her 100th birthday.
Of course, things today is like a million years from each other.
Dear, don't you know, a long time ago?
Dear, don't you know, a long time ago?
There you go.
2 poor little babies.
Oh, did they have a woman playing the piano there too?
Yeah. And for some reason, whatever they did, but it was just like all hell broke open when they get to a point where there was action.
Oh, you mean when the horses started coming towards you, then they played the piano louder?
In wars, when the Indians were killing somebody, and oh man. And we used to cry, gosh.
At the love scenes?
Oh, yeah. Oh, that was I can still see myself carrying my hat, my hand, and going over the bridge and kind of my eyes red. And you know what song was just popular then? I love the tulip, a big yellow tulip, and you were a big red rose. Was heaven that blessed me? With a blessing no one knows. You made life cheery when you call me dearie, down where the bluegrass grows. Your lips were sweeter than tulips when I wore a tulip. Helen and Pet had gone to the show, you know, she was little.
Uh-huh.
And they all sat in the front seat, you know, and then you know how that stage was in the front.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they all sat in the front seat. Well, then they had this play. Now I can't remember. We never looked who the players were, just so it was a good, loud movie. And of course the piano was going, you know, and pretty soon here comes this bunch of horses and cowboys on it, you know, and making a lot with the hoofs and that noise. And they came, and as she got closer to the screen, you know, they come closer, and she got scared, and she jumped out of her seat, and she threw her hands up in the air. Oh, she said, oh, back there, hold still, you can't come down here. She thought the horses were going to jump right down, right down.
Off of this.
Home, home on the range, where the deer. deer, and the buffaloes at home. Home, home on the range, where the deer and the buffaloes at home. Home, home on the range, where the deer and the buffaloes at home. Home, home on the range, where the deer and the buffaloes at home. Home, home on the range, where the deer and the buffaloes at home. Home, home on the range, where the deer and the buffaloes at home. Home, home on the range, where the deer and the buffaloes at home. Home, home on the range, where the deer and the buffaloes at home. Home, home on the range, where the deer and the buffaloes at home. Home, home on the range, where the deer and the buffaloes at home. Home, home on the range, where the deer and the buffaloes at home. Home, home on the range, where the deer and the buffaloes at home. Home, home on the range, where the deer and the buffaloes at home. Home, home on the range, where the deer and the buffaloes at home. Home, home on the range, where the deer and the buffaloes at home. Home, discouraging bird, and the skies are not cloudy all day. Them are the good old days. To see a picture that moves, but something you never saw before.
At the time when I started, there were very few theaters that had motors to pull the machines. We had no motors, but we had to, so therefore we had to crank them in order to show the pictures, you know. Everybody pretty well liked the Westerns back in those days. Everything moved. There were comedies and things like that. They would laugh a while, but they would be sitting waiting for the Western to come on. The comedies, usually they'd run them first, then give you a Western. And when the day you want to shoot Tom Mix or William S. Hart, just open the door and stand back until you were coming. William S. Hart, he was a bad man with the pistol. Everybody respected him. He was a two-gun man, you know. And William S. Hart was there. If he said, "You son of a shoat, you got to go," you go. That was his word, S-H-O-L-T. He wouldn't say nothing wrong, but that's what it'd be.
It seems miraculous now to think that you could get in and be entertained for such a little sum, and now it requires a loan on the family properties to get in. But it was new. It was a novelty. And you came out feeling rewarded. Oh, thank you. Fall in love with the actresses, and all so beautiful, and some were slicky, and some were modest, and some were, athletic, and some were demure, and every variety. Picture was moving, and you were part of it, and you were in it. You saw action. And in the train robbery, here were villains riding beside to mount the train and point the gun at the head of the engineer and command it to stop. And then they proceeded to go through the coaches and relieve the passengers of whatever they had in their wallets. And sometimes not too mercifully. It was dramatic in the extreme.
Times do change.
Just storefronts made into a movie house in the beginning.
They were pretty bad. Bad seats, bad, but who cared? We were thrilled to go to the movie. That was our big entertainment.
Wasn't those folding chairs that were used for the sitting?
Well, it might have been at that, I don't remember. But you never bothered with the chairs because you always sat on the edge of the chair anyway when they were playing the piano real fast. The horses were going along and he was pulling the guns to shoot.
And I remember the piano was always an upright.
Always an upright piano.
Yeah, and you had one of these revolving stools for it.
Yeah, they'd play the wrong tune and somebody in the audience would yell, "You're playing the wrong tune for that."
I don't remember that.
I remember that. You know, the horses were running and following the bad guy with the guns
With the
they picked up and
Indians.
were shooting all the time.
Terrible with the Indians when you think about it. And I did think about it later on as I grew up. How could I have been so intensely interested when the Indians were being killed?
They were our first citizens. We should never have treated them that badly.
It had a big impact on our lives. There's no question about it. It was wonderful to have the film up there to begin with. That was one of the marvels of our age.
How could they do that? How could they show people moving around? We couldn't figure out how.
That was
how
the
it
biggest
done.
part of
It was
the
a
wonderment of the miracle of.
It was exciting, very exciting, really. And I
Yeah.
stopped to think of it. So
Five-
that was our entertainment.
5 cents or no 5 cents. It was even worth the 10.
Well, I thought it was pretty shocking to see them kissing on the screen.
It was a movie, and I thought it wasn't real.
Oh, that's what you thought.
You had to use your imagination quite a little bit to figure out just exactly what was going on. And we always said, well, why didn't he kiss her? We had to go over that quite definitely after the party was over, and then we were back in school and we were discussing these. Of course, we always went back to school and discussed them. That was 9/10 of the party.
They would ended up always engaged or always to be married or something like that. And they were crazy about each other. And
That's right.
And they didn't hold back a minute about showing how much they thought of each other.
It was all very moving.
Yeah.
Very real.
Rudolph Valentino. He went for all of them, and they all went for him. He was some kind of guy, that Rudolph was.
He was a favorite, and he was the best looking thing you ever saw.
Oh, how I wish that I'd made over him and had him make over me.
But I didn't like his shiny hair. It looked like he poured oil all over his hair. It was always so shiny, you know. He was a good actor, but I didn't like him as a lover, which he was a lover. He had all the women crazy about him.
A lusty lover.
Yeah.
That wonderful tent interior of his.
I always lived in a tent.
You remember that too?
I wondered, where do they get all that food that they're eating there? I couldn't figure out how they had all that food they were eating.
We used to have a saying, say, oh boy, I'd like to find his shoes under my bed. Oh, every girl had a crush on him.
Not me.
No, you wasn't there. He was just a twinkle.
Oh, I loved Douglas Fairbanks. Everything he did was marvelous. Any show that he was in, I thought he was perfect and had a perfect part.
He was always waving a sword around.
Yes, that's right.
Or leaping among the chandeliers.
It was always a dramatic feat.
Something
a
dramatic.
Gymnastic activity of some kind, and that's what impressed me.
He
wanted things impressive.
What they call a swashbuckler.
Yeah, that's right. He certainly was.
All right.
The hero, of course, was Douglas Fairbanks. And he could do athletic feats that would astonish the rest of us. He could don his robes and he could leap from here to there and rescue princesses or climb ladders to reach his wish, oh, if that only was me.
Buster Keaton was a...
Buster Keaton.
Buster Keaton was...
And Fatty Arbuckle.
He was what
Fatty Arbuckle.
Buster Keaton was what you might call a deadpan. He seldom smiled or cracked. It had the same expression on his face all through the whole picture.
Who was that, you say?
Buster Keaton.
Arbuckle.
Buster Keaton.
There was just something about him that was so human, so touching.
Well, Buster was, he was just a regular clown, that's all it was.
We went there on Saturdays, and it always had a train and somebody that was strapped to the tracks, and that's where it ended to be continued the following Saturday.
It would fade out what's going to come into the next week, and that it would always be they would always leave something there that make the audience want to come back and see what's going to happen in the next, the next time when you fade out like that. You want to see what I'll be back in next week and all like that.
Sure, we couldn't wait for the next week to see who was going to save her soul. We didn't want her to die. She was our heroine.
The train would be coming down the track, and here this girl would be tied to the rails. Can you remember those kind of pictures?
Yeah. Oh, my. And she always got out of it.
Oh,
regardless
got out
of everything, she'd get out.
Because you lived it. You were there. You ain't running over the bar skirt, just like Pauline.
I'd get the most discordant or else the most sonorous music that would be deep and grim and horrible.
Scared everybody to death, and you hear people gasp.
I thought this was it, kid.
When that Phantom of the Opera walked in the sewers, he was the horriblest looking thing, and he was scary. Whew. So scared me half to pieces, so I just jumped up and sat on my husband's lap.
And I wouldn't look at the pictures. I crawled under the seat. I'd peek up from time to time to see what I was
You'd just be sitting on your seat biting your fingernails. You'd be so scared.
We were scared to death of them.
Birth of a Nation
Birth
was
of a
one
Nation.
of the
Yeah, do you remember
outstanding.
that?
Yes,
I
indeed
remember
I do.
seeing it, but I
The
don't.
Birth of a Nation. That's one of the best movies I've ever seen. I'd like to see it again. Ever hear about it?
Birth of a Nation 10 or 12 times, I guess. We'd always bring it back, and it paid off just as good. The last time we played it as it did the first time. It was just good.
And it seemed to me that it was prejudiced, that it represented unreality in a way. I didn't think that people could live like that and act like that. And I thought it must have been pegged up a little bit to give you an emotional response.
There was a lot of prejudice there. I remember my history teacher saying, I won't go there because it stirs up wrath against the Negroes. But I remember going to, I remember when it was first shown, sure.
I think it was a 3-hour movie. We were just thrilled to pieces. We had never seen anything like that. It's dramatic and it's filled with fine acting. And it set up my idea of what a movie should be like. My mother lived with me for some 15 years, and she would bring that picture back to mind. She said it's the most dramatic thing she ever had happen in her life.
Quit your laughing and get down to business now. Come on, let's go.
I never cared much for his movies.
Charlie Chaplin?
Uh-huh.
Oh my gosh.
Well, I remember his crazy walk. He had such a crazy walk.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, I remember Charlie Chaplin, and he'd make you laugh anyway.
It didn't require any costume. It was his false dignity.
He did everything to make people laugh, and he did it. Charlie Chaplin was one of our favorites.
Yeah, I guess he was everybody's favorite.
Yes, he probably was.
He always got he was always the underdog, and he always got the good-looking girl.
That's right.
Just really had that, yeah.
Egyptian was built in 1922 to 1923 as the first Hollywood motion picture palace. This is in the original location is the silent picture screen, this new screen, which was enlarged for the larger format motion picture. And this is the original ceiling, the original colors. It's about the only thing that's left in this building that has not been touched.
Do you happen to remember what the movie was about or anything?
No, but we tell you we didn't find out because we had to go on those pump things.
You mean on the railroad tracks? Those,
Yeah.
those working cars?
Yeah. With the help, we met those guys.
Silent movies, now you laugh when you see them. It's entertainment. But then it wasn't. It was real.
I would sit as close to the screen as I possibly could. Oh, yes, I love that screen.
Was it a
they
Western?
were all Indians and cowboys, that's all you ever saw. And
The guns were going left and right, and nobody ever fell down. They're very poor marksmen.
Silent movies began to show us a different way of life, I think.
You gods and little fishes, you met up with every country in the world. You went back into history.
It kind of opened up a new world to me, that there was something outside of Billings, Montana.
Alexander's
Best band in the land. There's a few words in there I don't know. If you want to hear the Swanee River played in ragtime, come on here, Alexander's Ragtime Band.